Dr. Demartini, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Likewise, when it comes to the brain and brain injuries that are sustained, most of them occur in the frontal lobe, which is such an important of executive functioning. What was your recommendation for somebody B that's down in the dumps and things aren't quite working up there the way that they would like to be? What is the first step that they could take?
Well, anytime you compare your current reality to the way it used to be or the way you fantasize it being, you won't appreciate life. You won't appreciate now. So I wouldn't compare it to the past because the past is the past. I wouldn't compare it to the future because that's something unseen and unpredictable. What I would do is ask right now, how is this, whatever's happening, on the way? How is it giving me a step forward towards what is truly meaningful that my life demonstrates is important to me? And how can I use it to my greatest advantage? It was Bill Gates that asked a question daily, at least this is what I was seeing in an interview. He said, what is the greatest, highest priority action I can do today with the resources that I have that will serve the greatest number of people uh, with the resources I'm aware of in the most efficient, effective manner? And that's the way to live your life. To how is whatever is happening on the way, not in the way? How can I use it to do something extraordinary in my life? I've seen people who turned their tragedies into comedies and became a comic. They had a person that was completely burned face and didn't want to be seen. And we asked that question and they turned it into comedy and made millions off their face and their body being burned because people are like, whoa. And he was able to turn that into something he was grateful for, to say that no matter what you've been through, you can turn it into an opportunity. And he made more money and more opportunities after the calamity than he was before, but he was comparing himself to himself, his past, and not looking at what he could do with it. And I believe that it's not what happens to you, it's what you decide to do with it. How you perceive, decide, and act upon it. So ask yourself a question, because the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions. Ask yourself a question. How can I use whatever is happening to me to my greatest advantage? How can I use it wisely and powerfully? How can I help somebody with it? How can I make a difference with it? If you answer that question, hold yourself accountable, the world on the outside, or even the physical form around you, isn't going to stop you from something extraordinary.
But when you get knocked on the head, you kind of go into this dense fog that occurs, and you just can't quite get the questions as clearly. You have these interruptory symptoms such as headaches, dizziness, and all of that. Is it just taking baby steps, or is it
Yes.
just the repetition of that question?
Well, you know, if you can feel, I'm going to make a statement that nobody can have a feeling without content in the mind. Nobody can have a feeling without content to the mind. And so that content is consciousable. You can become conscious of it. You can become aware of it. And even though it presently is unconscious, you can ask questions and make it conscious. And then in the process of doing it, you can make incremental momentum building steps. I had a gentleman who had a stroke when I was a little boy.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy down the street that was about 70 and he had a stroke. And the whole neighborhood found out about it, heard about it, were caring about the guy and etc. But the guy took it and decided, I'm not going to let this stroke get me down. So what he did is he got up and he kind of walked odd with his arm turned inward and holding tightness like a rigidity, and had a funny gait. And he started walking down the street. I think the first time he walked, it was probably 100 yards and back, then 110 yards and back, then 125 yards and back. And eventually he's walking around the block. And then eventually brought around the block multiple times. And he kept doing it. Then he started to do a little bit of shuffle where he started to look like he was trying to pick up a run. and he started to put something in his hand so it forced his hand to be straight. So he literally forced his hand to be straight, and he started to do it so he could actually move faster. And he held this little thing in his hand that held his hand the way he wanted to hold it because he couldn't do it consciously. And slowly but surely he started jogging and then running and rehabbed himself and neuroplastically remodeled what other areas of the brain that was able to rebuild itself, because it's a lot of neuroplasticity we don't give power to. We just give in instead of realizing we have the power to transform it. If you're willing to put the effort in, you can transform a lot. Maybe not everything, but you certainly have nothing to lose by trying certain things. He became a runner, a competitive runner by the time he was 75. He
That's
was an
ironic.
inspiration. He was an inspiration. The kids would go on their bicycles and run with this guy after a while, and he was first a freak. Nobody wanted to even do that. But after a while, when he started to jog, people were wanting to ride their bicycles and run with him and stuff. And the whole neighborhood was doing it. He was probably the most appreciated guy in the neighborhood because he was guiding the kids to believe in themselves and would give great advice and encourage that no matter what happens to you, use whatever you still got left to do something amazing with your life. That's what's possible for many people. And it may not be physical. They may be mental capacities. They may not have an exercise of body. They may have a complete stroke and damage and they not have a function of a body, but they can do it mentally. And they start to developing mental faculties or thinking faculties or singing or sound faculties or some other area of the brain or audio faculties. But they find out the area of the brain that is functioning and capitalize on it and use it to their greatest advantage to make a difference.
And when it comes to your story, seem to be very motivated from a young age. You dealt with chronic illness, I believe, in Hawaii, right? And you is that what propelled you to what you're doing in this moment right now? Or I mean, of course, there's lots of catalysts, but can you walk through the psychology of how you were motivated so much from a very early age?
When I was born, I had an arm and leg turned in. I guess the way I was positioned, it was turned in. And I had pigeon toe and pigeon arm, I guess you could call it that. And by the time I was about a 1.5, I had to wear a brace on my arm and leg on the left side. I also had a speech impediment, and I remember going to a speech pathologist and putting strings and buttons in my mouth as a kid. I don't remember all the details, but I remember doing that. I remember the building that we used to go to. And by the time I was 4, I got out of the braces. All I wanted to do was run because I'd been constrained. When I was about 6, going on 7, I was in first grade, and my teacher found out I couldn't read. No matter what I did, I wasn't making any sense out of reading. I was misspelling, mispronouncing, not getting meaning. It was just dyslexia kind of thing.
Right.
And the teacher said, first she put me in normal reading, then regular remedial reading, and then eventually the dunce cap. I had to wear a dunce cap when I was a kid. They still did that. And now today they don't see that, but that was still popular. I had a guy, Daryl Dalrymple. We used to face the window, and when we decided to learn to read, we could come back in the class.
That's insane.
That's what they did. And but that was perfect because my teacher eventually called my parents to the school and said, I'm afraid your son has got reading, learning, and speaking disabilities. I don't think he'll ever be able to read. He'll never be able to write, never be able to communicate, never amount to thing, never go very far in life. So that was the way I was told that, believed that, assumed that. I ended up focusing more on sports than academia. I only made it through school with asking kids questions, what words I could pick up. And I ended up dropping out of school when I was 13. And I made it to elementary school, and then it just down it went. And I was wanting to go surfing. I picked up surfing when I was 9, and I could stand on a surfboard. So I hitchhiked to California, and then eventually I made my way to North Shore of Oahu, and I lived on the North Shore, and I rode big waves with some big surfers, and kind of got into the surf scene and surf magazine and movies and stuff. And then at 17, I nearly died, and on a big wave, and also because of strychnine cyanide poisoning that I was consuming something that I wasn't aware that had toxic materials. And in the recovery of that, I was led to a health food, which was led to a yoga class to try to get mind over body. And at that yoga class, a guest speaker, Paul C. Bragg, was lecturing. And one night in 1 hour, this one man with one message um, spoke to me. And he said that we have a body, we have a mind, and we have a soul. And that if the body is governed by the mind and the mind is guided by the soul, we maximize who we are. And that we want to set goals for ourselves, our family, our community, our city, our state, our nation, our world, and beyond for 100 to 120 years. And that what you think about, what you visualize, what you affirm, what you feel, and what you write, and what you say to yourself, and what you take actions on becomes your reality and becomes your destiny. And nobody ever talked to me like this. They just told me that I was an idiot. That night, I had a vision and a dream to stand. I was standing in front of 1 million people over a giant square, and I was speaking articulate. And from that night, I had that vision. I had a dream to go back and overcome my learning problems and learn how to read so I could someday become intelligent. I never thought I was going to be intelligent till that night. And that led me to fly back to LA and hitchhike back to Texas, take a GED, miraculously guessed and passed, tried to go back to school, failed, almost gave up. And something my mom said, she said, son, whether you become a great teacher, travel the world like you dream, or whether you go back and surf or return to the streets, I just want to let you know your father and I are going to love you no matter what. We just love you. And when she said that, my hand went into a fist. And I made a determination that I'm going to master this thing called reading, studying, and learning. I'm going to master this thing called teaching and philosophy and healing. And I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to travel whatever distance. I'm going to pay whatever price to give my source of love across the planet. And I got up and hugged my mom, and I went to my room and I memorized 30 words a day out of a dictionary until my vocabulary was strong enough and I could pronounce it and spell it and use it in a sentence. And I grew my vocabulary 30 words a day until I had 20,000 words in 2 years. My vocabulary was from the bottom to the top of the class. And I've never stopped reading and learning every single day since that. I don't miss a day. So 52 years later, here I am. And I've read 31,000 books. I've written about 300 books. I've traveled 21 million miles. I'm a multimillionaire, independently 50 times over. And I have, communicated to over billion people. So what they said I would never do, you can do if you set your mind to it. If you let nothing on the face of the earth stop you from it. So yeah, when I hear people come up with, BS excuses about why they can't do little things,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of spank them a bit. And I said, listen, if you have a big enough reason for doing it, your obstacles become your opportunities.
And is that how you got introduced to the idea of values? When did that become such
That was
an
at 23. That was 1978, right there around August. I was 23 years old, 1978. I asked myself, why do some people walk their talk and some people limp their life? Why do some people do what they say and some people don't? What is it that drives people? I want to know how to maximize drive. And I learned about values. I learned about intrinsic values and extrinsic values and how to access intrinsic values, highest priority actions that you spontaneously do. So you have the most effective and efficient actions that lead to the most, incremental momentum building of steps that you become unstoppable and you just keep going. And once I accessed that, that was a major breakthrough for me because then I realized I could learn at more accelerated rates. I learned about conscious and unconscious reading and learning and visual reading. I learned all kind of things. I started to excel in many ways, and there's nothing I've done that somebody else can't do. Nothing. I'm just when they asked Michael Angelo how did he do what he did, how did you accomplish what you've done, and he said, if you saw how much work I put into it, you wouldn't think it was much at all. I just put a lot of work into it. I met a guy on the ship here. I live on a big ship and big yacht, and I had this guy on. He was one of the greatest pianists in the world. He started at age 3. At 9, he was traveling around the world as concert pianist, and he's now 81. And I had lunch and dinner with him when he was 80, and I asked him, you know, how did you accomplish this? And how many hours did you practice? And I was expecting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or something like that. 13 hours a day for 77 years.
Jeez.
He said, I know 8,000 songs, classical pieces of music by the greatest composers. I know 8,000 songs by heart. I can recite them without ever having to look at a piece of music.
That's
When you meet people,
mind-blowing amount of time.
when you meet people like that, it brings tears to your eyes and you go, wow, I wonder what else I can do with my life.
When it comes to linking your values with something that is mundane, let's say if I'm working a meaningless job to me and they have me scrubbing the dishes for 10 hours a night, but yet in the back of my mind I want to become a masterful speaker and a motivational speaker. How would you do that in that moment where you're scrubbing these dishes that seem meaningless, and how would you say this is fulfilling me?
Ah, very good. Well, it's nothing to do with what it is. It's about your perception of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I, yeah, I always tell people either go and do what you love through delegating, or go love what you do through linking. Either go do what you love through delegating, or love what you do through linking. And linking means you're taking the action and asking, how is it helping you move one step closer towards what it is that's most fulfilling and meaningful in your life? How is it on the way, not in the way? And I guarantee you, I have yet to have anybody that I can't transform their perception and make them inspired by any action they do at work. I get paid to do that for people, and it's quite intriguing. Either go do what you love through delegating or love what you do through linking. I'd love to share a story. I am 4 years old, and my dad had opened up when I was 2 a little plumbing business. He was an engineer, and he opened up a plumbing business. He wasn't a plumber, but he had plumbers that worked for him, and he opened up this plumbing business.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy named Jesse Carter, who is an African American guy that had 8 kids. He had an eighth grade education, lived in relative simplicity and poverty compared to the average person. And he was a ditch digger. And my dad gave me a job of sorting pipes in the back room, in the stock room, and cleaning, brushing pipes, oiling them, and sorting them and putting them away because they would get rusty over time if they didn't get used. And so that was my job, and I made that pipe area really organized and clean. I really did well with it. And I would go out on the trucks with these plumbers and I would learn about plumbing at that. And my dad said, today I want you to go out with Jesse. And I said, oh, which meant that I was going to go dig a ditch, basically.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay. And I kind of said, well, can I go out with Joe and Bob? And he says, no, I want you to go with Jesse. Jesse has a lot to teach you. So I go out with this truck with this Jesse Carter. And he was probably about that time about 40 years old, maybe 35, 40 years old. And we go to this house and we're putting in a new water main from the street to the house, from a water thing on the sidewalk, just on the other side of the sidewalk to the house. And he goes out there and he puts a stick on the ground by the main and a stick by the house, puts a string there, and takes a T-bar and goes down in the grass to see if there's any roots, any rocks, what's in the ground where he's going to be digging. And then he takes the hose and he waters the whole thing so there's moisture there. Otherwise, it clots. When you dig a ditch, it falls apart. And then he put newspaper on the side of the string, on the edge. And then he showed me how to dig a slice with a sharpshooter, which is a long shovel,
Mm-hmm.
and how to go down exactly a certain depth, how to turn the sod, and only a certain, maybe a 2-inch to 3-inch slot. That's it. Clot. That's it. Or clod or whatever. And he showed me how to turn it and turn it over onto the newspaper without damaging the grass, with the least amount of damage to the grass. And we turned this sod, and he made me eat it. I'm a little kid, 4 years old, digging this ditch. And he wanted me to use it. He said, look, you want to have muscles, right? He was trying to talk in my views. to get me to do it for him. And we put the sods over there, and I was really, kind of bragging in myself, proud of what I was doing because I was actually doing it. And then he went out there with a level and we leveled the ground. He said, if it's not level, you can get water stored in the thing and it rusts too quick. You want it to flow with a grade, a perfect grade. If it has any dips in it, you have a rust there and it won't last as long and you'll have to replace it. You want them to have at least 30 years for this. And he was very intelligent about digging ditches. We put in the ditch. We joined it to origin and where it went to the house. We put the dirt back on it, patted the grass, watered it down, fluffled up the grass where you could not tell we were there. There was nothing, you could not tell we were there. And he says, my objective is to deliver this water line, and the person called complaining that we never came. That's a sign I did my job, because they go out there and they didn't even know that there was a ditch dug. Because most of the ditch diggers were digging and making sods and mud and clots, and they didn't care. There was no respect. And so we were driving back. He said to me, this is now 65 years later, almost 70, almost 66 years later. He said, I have the most important job on this planet. He said, because without water, people die. I bring water to people. Without me, people are not clean. They're not healthy. They don't eat. They can't cook. They can't wash. They can't bathe. They can't drink. They don't survive. I have the most important job in the world. I was 4 years old, and I realized that there's no such thing as a job that's too menial for a mind that asks the question, how is this helping me fulfill my mission?
I'm gonna let that sink into my long-term memory storage. I'm fascinated with how we store memories, and what is your idea when there's an insight or something clicks and it's goes from the prefrontal cortex, maybe signals the hippocampus and gets stored away for long-term memory. How what are your thoughts around what is memory, and how can we strengthen it as we grow age or grow older, right?
Well, I wrote a textbook on neurology last year, and there's about 1,000 different models of what memory is.
Yeah.
Synaptic models, neural membrane models, quantum models, ion gradient models. I mean, there's all kind of models, protein models, receptor site models. There's all kind of models. But I like to think of it this way. When you have a sensory perception, well, first you have receptors that transduce, visual, auditory, smell, taste, tactile, and navigation and chemical and temperature and pressure and all the different things you could pick up. That goes into the spinal cord and into the brain stem, and it goes up ascending tracks up to the thalamus, the relay station. And then some of it goes over into the subcortical area, and some of it goes up in the cortex. If it's something that's associated with your highest value, it goes into the cortex, becomes conscious, but a lot of it doesn't. A lot of it goes into the responses for emergencies if it's something that's alarming. If it does, the amygdala will assign a valency to it by associations in the nucleus accumbens and also the pallidum and amygdala, and it will assign a valency to it that'll store as an episodic memory in that hippocampus. And now how that works, I mean, I can give all kind of theories about it, but I don't know if we have an absolute. But what it appears to be, because when you get a memory, you may have a visual component, an audio component, a tactile component, a smell component. You may have all kinds of sensory areas of the brain, the occipital, the temporal, the parietal, they all be active, but they still have a connection back to that amygdala to assign a valency to it. So apparently there's a homeostatic, highly refined series of association reflex arcs that are attempting to bring homeostasis to the body. And anytime we see something that we associate predator or prey to, pain or pleasure to, or avoid or seek, or instinct or impulse to, we store it in the hippocampus. So for later use, to run away from predator and seek prey, but it's ultimately a reflex for survival and for mastering life and to, achieving what we want in life, what's meaningful in life. And if it's balanced, it goes into the super area of the brain, the cortex of the brain. If it doesn't, it stays in that subconscious, subcortical area of the brain. So if it's highly polarized, it stays in that amygdala's hippocampus. And then if it becomes more neutralized, and as it does during sleep, it dampens and neutralizes, it goes through the cingulate cortex, it goes up in the prefrontal cortex, and now it's associated with many more associations in the corpus callosum. And now we're getting a kind of a, by the central limit theorem, we're getting more of a balanced orientation on it. So we're not reacting, we're now proacting. And so now those reflexes are more refined. There's more associations that are a network to it. And so our response to it is now stored in those reverberating circuits through associations and secondary reflexes. And so I don't think memory is just isolated in a spot. I think memory it can be also holistic. It's almost like you know, some Friedman and others have basically said there's like a hologram sitting there also, because it's all over. And then of course, when you have a perfectly balanced cycles per second, around 8 cycles per second, and you get an alpha theta state, you get a gamma synchronicity, and all the parts of the brain can synchronize at the same time when the idea is cognitive and you're conscious of it. So I don't know if there's any one model that's actually summarized yet memory. I could go for probably a whole day on just memory and all the different theories about it.
Yeah.
But I've been fascinated by, what is memory and what is imagination. But the hippocampus and the episodic memories are there for survival. But the things that are, everybody has moments when they have a gamma synchronicity in the brain where you're not getting delta from sleep, you're not getting beta from daytime, you're getting a balance of the two right in the middle, where you synchronize and you get a aha, an eureka moment, you get inspiration, and that's a moment of authenticity. It's a confirmation of a moment of authenticity and a confirmation that whatever's in your mind, it's on track with what's most meaningful. And that's where you want to master memory. And that you want to store, because in that moment you have grace, you have a love for life. You feel, you see the hidden order in the apparent chaos. In Wolfram's idea of mathematics, he says that chaos or disorder is missing information. And when you have a bias, a subjective bias in the hippocampus and the amygdala, you're missing information. You're seeking, avoiding because it's positive or negative. When you see both of them and you're mindful and you see both sides and you're not reactive, that's when the aha comes. That's when you see the hidden order, because now the missing information is recollected, as Plato says, and we become aware of the fullness. We have a mindful state, and we have simultaneous contrast awakened at the same time. Our EI ratios of excitation and vision are balanced, and our anti-memories and memories are balanced, and we see things from awe states. And to me, that's where you have a lucid awareness that's indelible, that's an inspiration that we guide our life by. It's more than just a survival reflex. It's a synthesis and synchronicity of all the hierarchy of reflex arcs in the brain going off simultaneously.
Now it's completely fascinating, and there was these monks that were in the Himalayas that they studied. Can't remember, back in the 1970s, and they were outside in the cold, and they were able through this tumo breathing to uh, elevate their temperature by, I think, over 10 degrees. Have you experimented with breathing, and is that your
Yes,
thing?
yes, yes, yes. I when I was 18 years old, I was studying yoga and meditation. I started studying all types of meditation yoga procedures. And I used to sit at Wharton Junior College, the first junior college I went to, and sit out in 100-degree weather and become present and imagine I'm in ice. And I would make it where there would be no sweating, and I could just reframe my perceptions, and my sensory perceptions are overruled by because you have sensory information that goes up to the thalamus, but you also have cortical control of the thalamus, so you can control the gating of that. And without a doubt, I could make hot cool. And then I went into a Seeker's Horizon health food store freezer, which was down in really cold temperatures. And I used to sit and meditate in there and to make myself imagine myself in heat. And I could not do it for hours, but I could definitely do it for long periods of time. Um, that would be abnormal. People would think you're a freak. But I was interested in what our body capacity was, our mental capacity to do that. And without a doubt, then I ended up going to a Shinto temple in Washington and studying with a Shinto master, who's a martial art master. And we used to go in this place. You literally go out and it's in the mountains and it's snow, and you go out there completely naked with a little white thing around your thing around your head, and you're basically butt naked. And you go into the ice water and you do this ritual, this chanting ritual in the ice water. And you couldn't do it if you were not doing this ritual. It'd be you freeze. And you go in there and you don't feel it at all. You're in there for almost 45 minutes and you're doing this ritual this whole time, and then you're refreshed. And when you get back out, you stop the ritual, you're hopping over the snow. You're cold. But while you're doing the ritual in the water, you're not noticing it. And you don't get hypothermia because your mind state is in a different altered state. And it's just like Tony Robbins when he used to do across the poles, right? He'd say cool moss. And his mindset is now relaxing and seeing cool moss. So we can associate different pathways and create cytokine responses and physiological responses that are different than our normal responses when we alarm ourselves under the sympathetic response. So we have control over that. So yogis have been doing that. John Basmajian, in his book on biofeedback, talked about it in a book called Autoregulation by Yogis. And they were opening up blood vessels and creating movements and body parts and stuff, all that were unconscious normally and involuntary, and was able to do it and make blood flow into different areas. They'd measure it and constrict it. And we have many more capacities, but we just don't use it. We're not practiced in it. But we all have the capacity to do extraordinary things with our body.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, it brings me to what are some of the most misunderstood parts of human psychology?
Well, I think we base the norm on the average person is uninspired, ungrateful for their life, isn't clear about a mission, doesn't feel there's meaning, and we take that as a standard and say that's the average person out there. Make that a norm, and I've never been satisfied with that. I didn't want to be average. I wanted to be, I've never met anybody that didn't say that they want to make a difference. I've never met anybody that didn't want to make a difference. I was in a prison, Krugersdorp prison in South Africa. I went 3 stories underground to maximum security prison, 25 years to life prison sentences. 1,000 of these guys in orange uniforms. I was
Yeah,
speaking. You go online, you can still see a picture of
that's
it
a
because it's in
tough
the
place.
newspaper.
You
Yeah,
know,
I've been to Poolsmore and Krugersdorp and the Spoken, and went there, and I stood on a little plastic stool, little can thing, and I had 6 guards around me, and I had the warden there, and they had security all around me. And I asked, how many of you, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've gone through, no matter what you've experienced, have a desire to make a difference in the world? Within a billionth of a second, every hand in that place was up.
now, what about narcissistic behavior? I've heard you speak about narcissism before. What the hell is going on in somebody's brain? Are they bad people or?
No, I really don't like the labels.
Oh,
I
okay.
think that I really think the labels are inaccurate. Um, because the person who's narcissistic, if you find out what they value and you assist them in giving them what they value, their narcissism comes right down. And the second you do something that challenges their value, their narcissism goes back up. Anytime you're supported by somebody and you infatuate with them and look up to them and they do things that support what you value, you humble yourself to them. You don't put yourself above them because you're humble to them and you sacrifice for them. You're altruistic. We all have an altruistic side. All we have to do is think about. I mean, I'm sure you've dated a few babes in your life. I'm assuming, unless you're into guys, I don't know, but I'm assuming you've dated a few girls, and a couple ones you probably had some infatuations with. Did you
Indeed.
have at least one?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
well, go back to that first infatuation, and I guarantee you, you sacrificed things you normally did in a day that you normally had as your routine, and you stopped doing them temporarily in order to fit into her life initially because you were infatuated and you didn't want to lose her. And so
Yeah.
you did weird stuff you don't normally do to please her because you feared the loss of her. So when you do, you're altruistically sacrifice what's important to you for them. So whenever you're the underdog, you'll be altruistically sacrificing for other people. But the second people challenge your values, that same girl eventually probably turned into somebody that didn't, um, and you weren't infatuated with. You eventually kind of got burned out on that, and then
Yeah.
you started to be tough on her, and then all of a sudden she's now, you're looking down on her. Now you're saying, "Well, my way or the highway." And you're now the narcissist comes out. Every human being has a narcissistic and altruistic persona, but that's not who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because I see people that are labeled that quite often, and I've met these people, and if I care enough to find out what they value and communicate in those values, I bring out the side that most people who won't take the time to do that just like to project a label. So I don't ever label somebody a narcissist or an altruist. I think that's completely um, not true under different settings. Maybe the setting, the way you interact with them, that's how they act to you, but they don't act that way to everybody. And finding out who they are playing the other side to helps you see that they're a human being with a set of values. You support their values, they play one side, you challenge them, they play another. I'm nice as a pussycat if you support me. I'm mean as a tiger if you don't.
I like that. It's so odd, Doctor. You are, this may sound a little strange, but you are like the mirror image of my uncle, who unfortunately, if he would have taken all the right pathways, he's a similar age, he would have made mass contribute, lots of he would have contributed to society in a very meaningful way. Unfortunately, I wonder what happened in his psychology to make him take the completely opposite route of self-sabotage, alcoholism, immensely smart individual, but uh, just interesting. I don't want
Well,
to go down any
I, I
rabbit
just
holes, but
I just finished yesterday doing a program on my addiction resolution methodology that I developed over the last many years. And one thing I feel quite certain about, and you have the background for it, so you'll immediately appreciate it, that if you don't fill your day with high priority actions that are deeply inspiring and meaningful, your day is going to fill up with distracting impulses and instincts that aren't. And if you don't, anytime you're impulsive, compulsive, immediate gratifying, and becoming dependent with the addictive behaviors, it's a compensation for unfulfilled highest values, partly. So that's the first step is finding out what is really meaningful to them and structuring their life accordingly. Because if they don't, they go downhill pretty quick. I know a gentleman, I'm not going to give names, but he owned a major railroad company in America. And this guy was hitting his mid 70s. I've known him for 23 years now. And while he was working, he was a teetotaler. He didn't drink a lot, didn't, had a glass of wine for dinner, that kind of stuff. And he sold his company, and his life mission and meaning was was gone. And he didn't replace with something deeply meaningful. And his drinking took off, and his behavior started changing, and the way he treated his wife changed. And debauchery, if I always say money without meaning leads to debauchery, money with meaning leads to philanthropy. It's so important to have an executive function to focus on. Think about it on a Friday night. If you got nothing going on a weekend, you're more likely to overeat, overdrink, and consume and do crazy behaviors on Friday night and Saturday night because you got nothing happening. That's why I work every day. I learned a long time ago, if I want to maximize my potential, throw out the idea that it's a weekend or a holiday. I don't care about those things.
yeah.
I fill my day with how I want my life to be on a daily basis. And if you have something very important to do on Monday, you govern yourself. A woman that's about to get married and is going to get in a wedding dress for about 10 days before that wedding, she ain't going to be over drinking or overeating. She's going to get in shape. She's going to make sure the pictures look good. She's going to have her abs flat. She'll starve herself. She's got incredibly disciplined until the day. The night of the wedding, she may pig out and overdrink. But before that, because she's got a meaningful purpose to focus on. If we fill our day with extremely meaningful, inspiring, and productive things that solve problems and serve humanity, we are not going to have as many of the challenges and debaucheries that we normally get because we have something meaningful to live our life by. People that don't have meaning are act like animals. And this was written by Aristotle in his time. You live
Mm-hmm.
by the affections if you don't live by the inspirations.
Man, I respect that. Work, like if you look at the definition of work, isn't it energy times in time work? Yeah.
It's force times distance, which is work. And then power is force times distance. Well, force is for mass times acceleration. Work is the force over time. I mean distance, and then you have the distance per time is now power, and you're empowered to the degree that you actually work efficiently in a short, efficient manner. And they found out when people do things that are highest on their value and they're most engaged, they're most effective and efficient and spontaneously act with the least amount of resistance and require no extrinsic motivation to get them to do it. That's when they have powerful states. And that's when they magnetize opportunities and people around them want to be around people that are authentic. And so they draw opportunities and they excel. And that's why living by priority is so important if you want to master your life and overcome a lot of the neurological conditions that are symptomatologies that are there to try to get us back to what's priority. Even the injuries to our head are, I always say injury means jury from within. And if we're cocky and we're proud and we're arrogant and we puffed up, we need a tragic event to bring us back down and to ground us, to get us authentic. Because pride's not who we are, shame's not who we are. Love and appreciation for life is who we are.
Absolutely. There's so many resonating pieces there with my life and where I want to go with my life. And one thing that does come up, however, in this day and age is AI. I would love to know your perspectives on the future of AI and humanity and linking as a cyborg-ish type character. Should I value um a knowledge that's greater than me that was created by humanity? Where do we go as society with that?
Well, um, there's boom and zoom and gloom and doom associated with AI.
Yeah,
And I those are psychotic, those views. The idea that it's going to save the world or it's going to destroy the world are both psychotic views. Uh, it's like anything else. I remember the Hermana radar range came in and they called it the devil, and they had a telephone. They thought that's ridiculous. And the car, anytime there's technological advancements, there's zoom and boom and gloom and doom.
right.
Don't get
Catastrophizing
psychotic.
essentially.
Yeah, don't make it the savior of the world or the devastation of the world. Just say that it's going to be part of it. It's going to have benefits and drawbacks. It's going to give advantages and disadvantages, like all genes, like all mutations, like all actions, like all human beings. There's two sides to it. Don't exaggerate or minimize it. Just honor it and use it wisely. And yes, there'll probably be every imaginable spectrum of what AI will do in the future. Probably be complete automated robots out there that are, in competition. They'll probably be halfway between humans. There'll probably be humans that resist it and say, "I'm holding on to my old religion and being a human being and staying a human being." And who knows what will go extinct and what will go on. But I don't think that's going to stop. I think that's inevitable. We have to learn how to use it to our advantage and it's going to be without a doubt advantages and disadvantages to it. And I'd say just like any human being, if you're married to somebody that you have things that you like and dislike about them, welcome to how it works. That's what love is. Love is a balance of opposites. And AI, for all we know, we're going to be dating girls that are robots and guys that are robots in the future. Who knows what'll happen?
Who knows? I love that perspective.
I
Uh,
Yeah, I've had girls come up to me and said, if I could get rid of some of your behaviors and just have your brain, I think I'd probably date you. I'm looking for a robot that does that.
oh my God, man. Well, I'm unfortunately gonna have to wrap this thing up. This little show that we have going on. 6% battery. I wish AI could just come in and be like, give me an automatic battery charge. But I want to be respectful of you and your time to wind things down. let's go back to brain trauma is what I specialize in. And what regardless, what is the resilience, what is what that wisdom that somebody can instill into their life just right now? Like how can they put that into their life right now listening to this?
Well, trauma is not what happens to you. That's the big lie in the world. Trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what your brain makes out of things that happen to you. That's a real important distinction to make, because I get to work with people that have been through. I mean, I had a lady that was stabbed 18 times, uh, chained to a block of cement and put on the highway to be run over by trucks. I've seen people that were beaten in the stomach for abortions after being raped. Um, a pregnant woman. I've seen every imaginable thing. I have yet to see anything that the mortal body can experience that the mortal soul can't turn into love and can't
Mm.
turn into opportunity. So trauma is an option of perception. And if I stack up and ask you, because I have people come in for me with post-traumatic stress, people blown up in front of them and bombs and you name it. And I ask, okay, so what's the benefit of this? And they go, there is no benefit. Well, then it's going to stay trauma all your life. As long as you have that perception, it's going to be stored in the amygdala. It's going to be stored in the hippocampus. It's going to have intrusive thoughts. It's going to occupy space and time in your mind. Answer the question. And we start digging, and I help them. And once we start seeing the other side, as Anaxagoras said 2,600 years ago, it's all perceptions, and all the ratios of perceptions determine the labels we put on life. So if we go in and find some of the benefits, we can turn this tragedy into comedy, or we can turn it back and forth. We make a heaven out of a hell or hell out of a heaven, as Milton said. It's all how thinking makes it so. So instead of labeling a trauma and running a story and being a victim of history, ask how specifically is this event? I'm not denying the event. I'm just helping you see that whatever the event is, it can be perceived differently and used with sensory and motor capacities. We have control over our senses, we have control over our decisions, we have control over our motor functions. If we go and find out how we can change the perception or decisions or actions out of it, we can turn a trauma into something that's amazing. So I don't like to use the word trauma except as its starting point. I like to ask, what's the benefit? And if I keep asking and keep asking and keep asking, they keep digging it, their neural pathways completely revamp what they perceived. And then they start getting a door of opportunities, and they can see beyond the trauma and transcend the trauma. So I haven't seen any trauma that I've seen so far that hasn't been able to be transformed, not one. So I really believe that we need to stop labeling it trauma and go, it's an event. Now, what are we going to do with it? How are we going to use this experience in our life to fulfill something meaningful now? That's the question we want to ask, and hold ourselves accountable to that instead of running a story and being a victim of history. Be a master of destiny.
There you go. Well, let me leave you with the last word. What is your goal? What is your biggest goal to achieve before you head on to your next destiny in the universe?
In the universe.
It,
Well, I don't know. I think I'm going to be probably maggot food pretty soon in another 20, 30 years. They'll recycle me and my physical body. Hopefully my ideas will go on. And, I wrote a book called The Secrets of Immortality. And I said, you got 7 areas of immortality. You can put ideas out there that last beyond your life. You can create a business that lasts beyond your life. You can create wealth that goes beyond your life, philanthropic perpetuity. You can create family and children that goes beyond your life. You can create an influence on society that goes beyond your life. You can create a physical body, a robot that maybe sounds like you, looks like you, that goes beyond your life. Or maybe in my case, I could marry 100 Victoria's Secret models and have them all pregnant or something like that on my last week. And you can also have what inspires you and what could inspire other people live beyond your life. So I would be concentrating on what you can have control over that can make a difference in those areas. And that's what I do. I'm just going to keep doing that and keep sharing research, writing, traveling, and teaching with people, because that's what I love doing. Chop wood, carry water. It's before enlightenment. It's the same as after enlightenment. You just keep going, keep doing what you love every day.
Beautiful. Timeless work. Thank you, Dr. Demartini, for coming on this podcast.
Thank you.